Hello.
Hi,
Thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you for doing this thing that you probably hate doing, but we're here.
I
Listen,
love talking about it, but when we hit record, I feel nervous. So I
yeah.
know by the time I feel nervous because I believe in it. And that's what I
Yeah.
always say is when anything for me is worth it, I usually
hmm
feel a little some kind of way about it.
Mm,
So
I love that. And we're going to unpack what it means, right? When you say it, I love it. But I want to start with a story. I met you 17 years ago. I was a little old public ally. You were my program manager. And that was the year that changed my life, the trajectory of my life, my path, how my gifts would unfold in the world. That was my crossroads. That was that pivot moment. And it wasn't just a program that you shepherded us through, myself and other 30 allies. You were my coach, you were my program manager. And it was the visceral experience that I had with feeling seen, heard, and then when you held space for me to evolve, right, and shift and grow, that was what I really noticed as healing for me and was a real shift in my whole life. I said it 3 times now. 8 years ago, we reconnected. We've known each other and been in each other's orbits, for a long time as friends and colleagues. But 8 years ago, I was working with a young man who really wanted to figure out how to mow lawns. He was really interested in landscaping and lawn care. Well, as a support person, I know we can't just teach someone a skill in isolation. We got to go do the thing, right? We have to go get practice and experience. Well, at the time, he lived in an apartment complex. The owners there, they weren't really having it when I said, hey, can we mow some lawn and get to know? They weren't really understanding. I didn't have a lot of support. Looking at his network, hey, is there any lawn that we can practice in or mow? Everyone kind of looked at me in the human services field of like, what do you mean? Isn't that crossing boundaries, right? So typical fine questions. I understand where they come from, but I needed a citizen, I needed a human being to let us come and learn and play and explore outside of punishment or consequence or goal. So I call my friend Danae Riggs, who is a human being among all things. I don't care what labels we have. You're a person. And when I called to say, hey, do you need your lawn cut? Can I pitch you an idea here? It wasn't only a yes. You showed up as a host for the entire experience. And this gentleman and I got to come over. We got to learn together. We got to practice, right? I know we did some other landscaping. As so what we were doing together is we were starting to build his resume, right?
mhm.
We weren't in a program that offered that, but we started to look at, okay, what are the skills we're learning? What are we doing together? How does it feel? What do you want more of? What do you want less of? This young man realized through that experience, he didn't want to have shit to do with landscaping. This wasn't his real passion, right? But he wouldn't have known that if we weren't able to practice and engage and really be seen as fellow citizens versus the client that role he was in. So I wanted to start with that story because I know you and I know your guts and I know you have something that I've not learned how to teach, which is how to be a person alongside another person on their journey. So I want to open this floor here. I want you to talk to us about you. Who are you? And what brought you to this work? And when I say this work, you are a certified trauma specialist, you are a resilience worker and coach one on one with people and with families. You host trauma informed supervisions and you do teaching, you do engagements. But I think one of the real gifts you have is walking alongside people. And I want to unpack a little bit more. What does that mean? And how do you do it? Right?
Mm.
It's a big question, but if you could anchor us back to kind of my framing question, who are you? And what brought you into this work in the way that you're showing up in it now?
Um, ooh, what a good story. It made me feel all the feelings. Um, I think, Sarah, I have tried to describe my work in a way that is, I use this language all the time of I've kind of played for the same team for a long time with different positions, different colors or jerseys. But Riggs on the back of my, jersey has been there and I've been doing human work for a long time. And, you know, At 43 years old, I'm proud of where I am. I look back to really my first introduction to direct service, social service, human service type of work, more than just clubs or belonging in friend circles or volunteer groups in high school, things that I hope some of us and all of us really deserve to have access to. But when I think about getting paid, right, how my bills got paid and a way to do it, I look at a very first experience I had, which was direct service working with folks who were dealing with the HIV/AIDS epidemic of the late 90s. Many different sexual orientations at the helm of it. Of course, a lot of folks believed that that disease at that time was a gay disease. I don't even know if I could count how many gay people I personally knew on one hand based on my upbringing. But anyway, I'm 19. I'm driving around a city in an urban setting, not a neighborhood I'm familiar with, or not any of the 51 neighborhoods of Cincinnati. I knew my neighborhood, the 52nd one, but I didn't know these other neighborhoods. And I'm just in other communities around people and in their homes and spaces where I had this click of like, hey, the whole world doesn't live the way I live. Hey, the whole world hasn't had access either positively, negatively, safely, unsafely to some of the same experiences I have. And there was this innate feeling in my gut that I'm sure was a seed that was watered by a supervisor I had at the time and a mentor who named for me, what decisions did you make differently to be here versus here? What opportunities, what doors were opened for you? What did you say yes to? What did you say no to? And there was this feeling in my gut, Sarah, that my journey had had its own strifes and it would go on to still have strifes. But there had always been this just one different choice. If it's a choose your own venture, there had been this one different choice that meant I wasn't homeless, or that I didn't have a diagnosis that time that came with such a stigma. Just these things that I was dealing with, which was homelessness, poverty, mental health, addiction, and AIDS. And when I think back to that 19-year-old and I think about the 43-year-old, the fundamental guts of who I am haven't changed. So the story that you describe of knowing me 17, 18 years ago, or interfacing with me mowing a lawn 8 years ago, or the work that I just did yesterday, the fundamental core of me and my method, or what I find to be true that works in human service, has not ever wavered or changed. The big old cliche word, and I felt nervous about even naming it, but it's love. And it's about loving people. And it's about truly trying to suspend all of my natural instinct to have implicit bias, to have judgment, to have all those things that cloud love, that cloud me from just heart opening, wholehearted living, this pulsating, I have to use my hands, this pulsating piece of here and my gut and here too, but mostly my gut, that is radiating just this acceptance, this, hey, come sit down. Let's meet you where you are. You're a name on a list. You're a name on a Post-it note. Soon you won't be a name. You'll be a collection of stories and experiences to me. But when you are the name on the Post-it note, the first introduction, hey, you're going to coach this roster of allies through Public Allies. You're going to love this caseload of people. You're going to show up and run this program with these following children, 1 through 15. I just would look at those names on paper and say, I love them. I'm going to bring them into love, and not just how I love. You think about the love languages. How do they need to be loved? How do they want to be loved? How do they feel seen, heard, and held? I'll take what I know to do, but it might not be brave or safe. And I'll ask them, what is it that you need? And that's when I boil it all down, that's the team I've played on for a long, long time.
Danae, as I'm hearing you talk, I'm pulling up this book, The Neuroscience of Human Relationships by Louis Cozolino. And this is what strikes me. We can talk about love all day long, and some people might push us off as woo-woo hippies, which we are.
I
And
know.
and the science says, can attachment change for the better? In essence, can our social brains be healed by loving relationships? The answer is unequivocally yes. That there is something Louis calls about the social synapse, right? This space between you and me. And it's not about what we're doing, what lawn we're mowing, what meal we're dropping off. It's how we are being that really ignites that healing journey, right? And what I just heard from you is that essence, that notion of love. You've never strayed from that, and it served you in all these different ways. And that I would imagine, in any situation that you're in, if you can boil down and let ego, let power, let circumstance, right, go by the wayside and anchor back into that love, that's what makes you a safe person for other people.
Yep,
Right.
yep.
And so I guess that kind of leads me to my next question. I already know. I said, what's your greatest gift when working with people one on one? I know it is this the essence of love. How do you make that practical? What does that mean? Or what's an example of how love shows up in action in your everyday and in your authenticity with people?
Well, I think the easiest example that just bam popped into my head is this construct around modeling.
Mm,
And, you know, gosh, the good old cliche. I was raised in a very religious environment. I don't subscribe to that, but that good old cliche of treat others as you'd like to be treated, right? Or the even a simple commandment of loving one another. Where I go to that though is that modeling, Sarah, for me has always been, if I treat that human being, whoever's in front of me, the way that I indeed know I love being loved, the way I feel seen, heard, valued, supported,
mm,
held, listened to, cared for, if I can give that out, and then, like I said, tweak. Now you tell me more about what it feels like for you. And I'm really prepared to lean into that curiosity and listen.
mm-hmm,
Um, what I've noticed is that I show up as a safe, whole person with good intention,
mm,
and that folks will generally meet me exactly there. The naysaying comes in with things like boundary or dual relationship or some of these words that I don't actually have a lot of education in those words. And in
mm,
some ways, I think that's a good thing.
mm-hmm.
In other ways, I'm street smart enough to know what you're talking about. And I would say, you can have boundary when you show up as human beings and you say what the boundaries are.
Mm-hmm.
You outline from the get-go, what can you expect of me and what can I expect of you? Whether it's a friendship or it's a service ship, something is
Mm-hmm.
paying me to be in company with you. I don't, that's not what guides me. That framework
Mm-hmm.
is what guides me. It's a reality. I wish I paid my mortgage in love, but I can't.
Mm-hmm.
Saying that lately. But in some ways I do, because the
Yeah.
gift I do show up and bring is that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess the modeling, I had a situation where I was working with a young woman who, she'll go down in history for me as someone that I'm just so forever grateful to have crossed paths with. I think we all have a handful of
Mm-hmm.
those. If we're really lucky, we got lots of handfuls and toes of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll always treasure her, and I have a very strong natural support relationship with her today. But I got real sick last year with COVID, real sick prior to the vaccine being available. And it's the sickest I've ever been. And it's the scaredest I've ever been about my health. And I mean, we're talking day 45, day 50 of this virus really taking over my everyday experience. And I went MIA a little bit, with these folks I was serving and working with. And she's a young adult, 20-ish years old. And she sent me this text message one day that just was so powerful about, hey, it's okay that you've been absent. I miss you. I love you. I miss you, but it's okay. And I understand. And she talked to me in this way that was just so healing. And when I thanked her later on in person in her living room for having the courage to reach out to me. And of course, there's all kinds of layers to the story, but it was so special to me that she did have the bravery to reach out to me and whatnot. And anyway, when I thanked her for it, I don't know if you all have ever seen, there was like an 80s after school special where it was all about drugs. And this kid was telling his dad, like, I learned this from watching you about drug. And it was like, just say no to drugs, right? The Reagan campaign of DARE or whatever it was. So I'm an 80s kid. So I've got that in my head of, I learned this from watching you. And of course, in that commercial, it was, I'm doing drugs because I learned this from watching you, Dad.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, what? But in this, she said, well, Danae, I learned how to talk to you because that's the way you've talked to me for the last 18 months. I can't tell you that without feeling it. I just looked at her and it was so flattering. I try to be very humble. Humility is important to me, but it was so flattering. And my ego and my kudos, I put it in a jar for a day when I need to hear it, because her reflecting back to me, I talked to you the way you've been talking to me for the last 18 months. I saw you. I met you where you were. I gave you grace to not be perfect, to be absent, to be sick. She talked to me in such a safe and healing way. And she had been so accused of being incapable of that kind of connection and that kind of empathy when I first began to work on her team. And I just thought, ooh, that's so freaking cool. Like, wow. And I'll never forget that, because that's how you do it. You model, you give it without it being deserved. You figure out how to love when it's not convenient or easy for you. Because that truly is the definition for me of unconditional love. And if more of us felt that, that's my philosophy for social change and for how we heal the world. And I'm not too earthy, crunchy, or hippy dippy. I don't compost. I throw plastic away. But I do believe in the power of our civility and humanity and showing up in that unconditional love.
Incredible. What you're naming for me is that outside of program or model or degree or philosophy, right, out of ideology, there's a central humanity that you try to connect to. And when that's offered, when we work with and support people from that lens, their humanity can shine and can flourish. If we treat people as clients, as other, as separate, right, as not having capability, not having capacity, that's what we're going to see, right, when we keep that low. So it brings me to another curiosity I have. There's a lot of love going out. There's a lot of efforting or orientation to how do I help you feel special, seen, whole, and full. What are you doing back to yourself? How are you? What's the love that you pour back into Danae so that you can show up and really do this work with fidelity?
Yep. Great question. Again, some of my thoughts probably feel cliche, but the same way I've been on a journey for decades about my own privilege or how I view the world is the same way I've been on a journey about how do I pour in, how do I refill my bucket, whatever the latest terminology, self-care, love, treat yourself, whatever it is, whatever the latest thing is, I've been on my own journey with that. I must be doing something right if at 43, I'm not burnout, making widgets in a widget factory. You know, I don't think I don't carry myself every day as angry or hostile with undercover, sadness or undercover hostility. And that's okay if that's where you're at. But I guess I've told some people lately that, look, I ain't got an athletic bone in my body, but if I played for the WNBA and I could dunk like nobody's business, I'd be in a gym exercising 24/7, right? Part of my routine to be who I was, you'd I'd be in a gym. You'd see me in a gym 8, 10, 15 hours a day. I'm sure Olympians, I don't know, because I don't even know anyone like that, but I'm sure that's where they're at. They're not watching Game of Thrones or, on their couch, Netflixing it in the basement like I do half the time. So my point is what I realized was, to do this work, Sarah, I had to train like a WNBA player, but my court is regulation. My court is, how do I stay regulated? How do I build new practices? How do I sustain old practices? How do I pull out things that I knew to use in the 90s and the 2000s that have always worked for me? How do I embody the resilience factors that I'm out here in the streets teaching about? I can't be a hypocrite. It's not any good. Not only is it not any good professionally, I would have no efficacy because I wouldn't have anything to give. The other thing is, I heard a lot about trauma, vicarious trauma. Those things were terrifying to me, because I didn't possess some of what I assumed were these like other skill sets that people probably got in their master's programs, like how to fail, how to take care of yourself. Like, I assumed that you all got these big degrees where a big part of your curriculum was how to not be a wounded warrior or whatever.
Nope.
That ain't true. From word on the street from all my educated folks you don't remember taking a class that was called that. You didn't get a skill set. A lot of tools weren't put in your toolkit about, hey, you chose social work, you're gonna fail. You're gonna fail over and over. Other folks will fail you. You will fail in systems, like systems will fail. Anyway, since I don't think that NKU's passing out master's degrees about that, I'm sure they're great. I didn't slam NKU. I could have chosen the University of Who's What's It's. That's one of your
exactly. There you go.
But my point is I realized that I needed to figure out those things for myself. I needed to do them, make time for them, carve them into my schedule, and treat them as sacred, and not compromise those things, and have people that I could talk to when my bucket wasn't as full, or have support systems that I would need, allyship in this work as well, and to be very intentional about how to tap into those. And so what I didn't hear enough about, which is what made me smile as you started to ask your question, is I didn't hear enough about vicarious resilience. I didn't know that as I would go on healing journeys with others, it would heal journeys of my own. And I've got a fun story about that if we have time, but I had just this big moment recently where it didn't even occur to me until I was sharing the story of this thing that the byproduct was huge to my own resilience and my own story. And I was just, it was just crazy, because I've always known that I got something I didn't know how to talk about, which was probably dopamine from doing service and being in service with others. But I didn't really know, I guess, until the last handful of years, how it makes me tick and the importance of it all. And I just didn't hear enough about, if you're doing it and doing it well, and using all these skills and tools, you can have this big, huge thing called vicarious resilience. And it's really amazing. And that's what continues to keep me at the work.
Beautiful. I first heard that term from mutual colleague Ilea Duggar. She named that for me, and I thought, run with that, because I think that's exactly the antidote to what we're talking about. And we get that. I just want to reiterate, when the practices that we offer for others, we put those into practice in our own life. It's not a different set. It's the same journey. And it reminds me that we cannot walk alongside anyone else if we're abandoning and not walking alongside ourselves, right?
Absolutely.
So I think to kind of really anchor on, okay, so what? The so what of all this? If you're walking alongside professionals, parents, staff, right, the caregiver orientation, what can they expect from you as a support person? And I want to deepen that. If you're walking alongside with someone who traditionally receives services, right, and in that role, how do you walk with folks and really make sure that we're all walking together, that there's not hierarchy of the journey, right, that we're on this journey together?
Hmm.
The first thing that I guess I think of is this skill around listening. So if you walk a journey with me, you're going to get intentional and empathetic listening. I've coined it the Cadillac of listening. You're going to get the Cadillac. Everybody deserves to drive the caddy. And you're going to get it. You're going to get that method of listening. Deeper with that type of listening comes that you get to be in charge. You get to have agency. I will advocate. Ain't nobody saying nothing bad about Miss Jenkins, right? That's a good old, another 90s reference in Living Color. I'm not going to let folks, I'm going to be an advocate, a fierce advocate for people, but I'm also not going to advocate to the point where you don't have a voice. In this us and them, in this service or I have medicine, you need to be healed mentality, we don't have equity, and that just won't work. That's just not a way that anyone is we're not going to heal me, you, anyone. And so I guess that advocacy though comes with inviter language, inviter behavior, where I'm going to invite you to take a journey into what it looks like to use your own voice. I'm going to support, I'm going to advocate, I'm going to build a relationship that's curious but I'm going to, I'm going to ask you to show up for yourself, right? That efficacy is what we need more of. I might not be here at this exact walk with you, who knows how much longer. So that resilience is really cool because it lasts a lifetime. I'm not the keeper of it. That resilience then is in each of us, and we proceed and move forward in the world. The second thing you're going to get with me is creativity. If it can't be done, I love that. I love those words. Can't be done, or it doesn't exist. Well, then we'll create it.
Here we go.
Can't do it? Watch me. So many people in my own life have said, you can't do that, or you won't do that, or you'll end up here, or that decision will mean this. We've got to be able to see that there is something different about the future. And so I'm going to create with you. I'm going to co-create. We're going to be fun, and we're going to think about things and be curious about it. And when you're ready, we'll go. And I guess that's what I love about coaching. There was a metaphor used a long time ago in helping people understand what coaching was. And the coaching difference, the body of work was riding a bike. And the difference between how a consultant might come in and teach you to ride a bike, a mentor might show you how to ride a bike. A boss might say, you do this, and this is how you ride the bike, and you do it here, and you finish it here, and you park it here, and da, da, da. A coach says, yo, when you're ready to ride the bike, I'm down to be your cheerleading squad.
Yes.
I'm running alongside you. I'm biking alongside you. I'm here. I'm down for the journey. That's the kind of coach I want to be. You're capable of riding the bike. We all know that, right? So my job is just to accelerate it, or my job is to be curious about it, to cheerlead it, if that's what you want. If you said, I ain't never riding a bike a day in my life, then that gets to be true too.
There you go.
And again, until you're ready, or if you're never ready, I'm still running alongside you. And I think that creativity, that intentional, empathetic listening, that's what you're going to get if you go on that journey with me beside you.
I tried to trick you. I tried to separate these two audiences, and they're not separate. They're the same. We're all human beings. This is what I learned from you 17 years ago, how to be a person, right? This is not something that's just coming out of the ether. It's in my guts where you poured into me. And I'm so happy to uplift you as you pour into other people. And I would just invite anyone who's listening right now, who's watching, to really take those three words: invitational, engaging, and creative. That's what you'll get if you come into the flock with Danae Riggs. And I could also talk to you for hours, but I'm going to land the plane here and just end on something that you also brought to my awareness years ago, the notion of a high five. Right. Public Allies, the program that I met you in, we would always get the newsletter. There are always high fives at the end of that. If you could give a high five to let's just say, I'm not going to pick just one person. If you could give a high five to the folks that you walk alongside, what's one high five that you would send out to people?
Ah, that's so hard. Um, I guess if I had to put it all into one, Sarah, sometimes we hear about resilience and strength and courage, and we hear someone say, "You're so strong, you're so resilient, you're so brave." And there's times when I've heard that myself. Someone has been giving me that high five, and I think, but I didn't want to have to be.
Mm, mhm,
Or I shouldn't have gone through or experienced these things for that to be what bubbled up, right? So I
mhm,
guess in the spirit of that, I would just say many of the people that I walk alongside didn't deserve the barriers, the challenges, the traumas, the stress.
mm,
I'd say that to each of us, Sarah, we are enduring a pandemic that I just haven't felt like had an end to it yet.
mhm, mhm,
We're weary. We're all weary. We've grown weary. We've tapped into reserves, and the reserves could feel exhausted. My high five is we've done nothing to deserve it. But GD, man, we are more resilient and brave and stronger than I could have ever imagined. And
mhm,
so I see you. I see the strength. I see the weariness. I see that you didn't deserve it.
mhm,
I see all of those things, and I still say, but we're here and we're doing it and we're breathing in that air. We're
mhm,
looking at the same stars in the same sky, regardless of where we might lay our heads. And
mhm,
that's pretty outstanding. That's pretty
mhm.
remarkable.
Mm,
Um,
mm, mm,
so that's my high five is just I see us, I see it all, the duality of
mhm,
that,
mhm,
the weariness and the strength. And I see the people
mhm,
that I work with in some of those pockets of being and feeling. And it's just an honor when someone gives you an invitation into that part of their life.
mhm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Much more of a hug than a high five, which is classic Danae Riggs. Thank you for hugging on everyone and on me right now, even in this conversation. And yeah, we'll see you out in the work and look forward to people getting to know you and your gifts even more.
Awesome. Thanks,
Thanks,
Sarah.
Danae.